But she gave me this piece of selenite, satin spar selenite, and I held this piece of satin spar selenite. And after about a minute, I was like, I'm feeling like spaced out, floaty, like what I would describe as high. And she's like, yeah, that's the crystal's energy. And I was like, wow, like
Mhm.
these things actually they affect us. And of course, in this day and age of physics and we have a much better understanding of that. But this was in the early 2000s, and
Mhm.
it's like outside of pockets in the spiritual community, this just was not a thing at
Mhm.
all.
Welcome to Big Crystal Energy, Season 3, the Veil Season. I'm Ashley, and I live at the threshold between medicine and magic, between the visible world and what waits just beyond it, between the person I present and the witch I am. I've learned something. The in-between isn't a problem to solve. It's a place of power. This season, we're exploring the veil, where Victorian women spoke for the dead, where fairies guard the crossroads, where glamour becomes armor, where you stop apologizing for being both things at once. The crystals have always known the way through. Let me show you. Hello, and welcome back to Big Crystal Energy. I'm Ashley, and I'm so excited you are here because today's guest is someone whose work has truly changed how I think about crystal healing. And I don't say that lightly. My guest is the one and only Krista Mitchell, known as the Rock Whisperer. She's a crystal healer, author, and teacher with over 20 years in this work, including 15 years of full-time practice in New York City. Here's what makes Krista different. She has no mentors. No formal teacher ever guided her into this. She calls herself field trained and stone taught. Everything she knows, she learned directly from the crystals themselves through her own lived experience. And what that path led her to is not the soft love and light version of crystal healing you'll find in most places. It's something deeper and a little more unsettling in the best way. We get into why she believes so much of what's popular in the spiritual world right now, things like cord cutting, only treats the symptoms, not the cause. Why cutting a cord without addressing what's underneath it means that cord is probably going to come right back. And we go deep into something that completely reframed how I think about fear. The idea that memory itself is subjective. Reality is built on memory as much as it's built on thought. And that means the fears we can't explain, the ones that make no logical sense, might not even belong to this lifetime at all. She shares a story from our Akashic Crystal Healing certification about a fear of bees that goes back further than you'd ever expect. And I promise you, it's going to change how you think about your own irrational fears. I also get real with Krista about something personal, what it's actually like when people around you don't take this work seriously. And I share a bit of my own story doing this work as a physician assistant, navigating two very different worlds. This is a truly wonderful, one of my favorite episodes ever. So let's get into conversation with Krista. Welcome back to Big Crystal Energy, everyone. I am so thrilled because I have the incredible Krista Mitchell on today. I am just so honored to have her here. We had in perfect Mercury retrograde timing some technical issues, and I'm having like the worst Mercury retrograde of my life. But I know that this is going to be so good today. So, Krista, welcome so much to Big. Welcome so much. What am I even saying? Welcome for coming to Big Crystal Energy.
You know what? We're just going to embrace it all. We're going to embrace it all. Thank you for the welcome. I'm actually really happy to be here.
Yay! So one of the things that I have been thinking about, like I think about constantly with my day or when I start my podcast, and this is not something I prompted you with ahead of time, but what is giving you big crystal energy these days? Because I think big crystal energy is just like what is making you feel excited these days?
Okay, like you mean what crystals making me feel
No,
excited?
like for me, big crystal energy is like that energy that you get. Like if you were holding a big crystal, like what do you feel? Like what's making you feel excited? Just in general, like what are you feeling excited about these days?
Oh gosh. What am I feeling excited? It's strange. Excitement is not a feeling I experience very often. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know if that's just kind of like where we are in the world and life or whatever, but it's not it, but I guess and and we get that dead noise on the recording that no
No,
one
it's
ever
okay. I
wants.
mean, it's like, what is like something that like it doesn't have to be like excitement as like woo woo woo. Like what's just like giving you like energy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess what always gives me big crystal energy, if I understand the meaning of it properly, because it makes me think of another thing, which I won't say here for reasons of politeness, big something else energy. But anyway, but I guess it's but I guess you know what always, and I mean, I'm sitting here with two of them right now. Is
Yes.
the Lemurian? It's the Lemurian energy in medicine. That is like I think if I were to say, because we evolve through our crystal journey over the years, and of course, I love all of my allies, and they're just I everything I have is because of them, and so that credit must be paid right away. That must be, but I guess it's yeah, the Lemurian is just where my heart is because it's so pure, it's so full of light, it's goodness on so many levels. It's so deeply healing. It's to me, it's like it's encoded in the crystals, in the stones of the earth. It's like it's the medicine. I'm not going to say it's the only medicine because of course that'd be ridiculous, but it's like it's some of the medicine we really need right now in this world. And so often when people are hurting, when they're down, when they're really struggling, especially with dark things, and of course we have to face those, right? That's part of our process and our journey as well. But being able to call in that song, being able to weave in that light, it's just it's the best way I can describe it is that goodness that comes back into our spirits, that reminds us that we can do this, that reminds us of all the incredible things that we are. So I would say if anything gives me big crystal energy, it would definitely be the Lemurian seeds.
I
Yeah,
love that.
definitely.
That's a
Mhm.
perfect answer. I love that.
Oh, good.
Oh,
Yay, look at what you guys did again.
yay. It's giving me big crystal energy is thinking about surviving this Mercury retrograde and finally feeling like I'm going to get my life back on track.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If there is such a thing, right?
Yeah, the
That
thing. True.
alignment, cultivating that
That's true.
alignment. Okay, I feel you there. I get you now. I get what you're talking about now. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you have been working with the crystals for many years, and I'm just curious what led you down that path.
Well, it's interesting. I was drawn to them when I was a kid, and I just started collecting them. I think in my tweens, if that's still a thing that people say. And then it was in my kind of mid-teens where I started getting into, Wicca, earth magic, all of these things, and starting to work with crystal energy in terms of charms, other stuff. But it wasn't until I was in my early 20s in New York City and I was learning Reiki, and a friend of mine had taken a crystal workshop somewhere in the village, the village in New York City, because that was where you took things like that back in the day. And she asked me if I was willing to do an exchange with her. So I would, I could practice Reiki on her, she could practice crystals on me, and I was like, yeah, sure. And I'm going to be completely honest with you, I did not believe that they could have healing impacts on us,
Mhm.
and certainly not physically. To me, they were pretty magical rocks that had these magical properties. But to me, that was magical practice. I guess for some reason it was different. Or I separated the two. But she gave me this piece of selenite, satin spar selenite, and I held this piece of satin spar selenite. And after about a minute, I was like, I'm feeling like spaced out, floaty, like what I would describe as high. And she's like, yeah, that's the crystal's energy. And I was like, wow, like
Mhm.
these things actually they affect us. And of course, in this day and age of physics and da da da, we have a much better understanding of that. But this was in the early 2000s, and
Mhm.
it's like outside of pockets in the spiritual community, this just was not a thing at
Mhm.
all. So I started, we kept doing our exchange, and I started investigating, working with different crystals. And then I just naturally, intuitively just started incorporating them into my Reiki practice.
Mm.
And everything just kind of took off and changed from there. So we could say it was serendipity, but really in many ways they'd been calling to me, they'd been singing to me throughout my life.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. And did you have mentors along the way? Because I know that I've heard you speak to the fact that a lot of what you learn that you have learned, you just really channeled from the crystals.
Yeah. When it comes to crystals, I have never had a teacher. I've never had a mentor. Sure, there was a person here or there that I might have asked a question, but I was never under anyone's tutelage. It was just always them. So that's why I always say I'm field trained and I'm stone taught and I'm field trained. Because even back then, the books that we had and the great books, I still have a number of them in my keeping and in my library today, but they spoke to the properties.
Uh-huh.
They didn't speak to how to actually use them, how
Mhm.
to actually work with them. And there was like a teacher or two in New York City at my time when I was starting out, who, they were teaching. One of them was Jeffrey Yuen, the Taoist grandmaster, I believe, of crystal healing back then. He was teaching. There were a couple other people, but they were just so expensive. I couldn't afford to train with them. I was just starting out on the path. I was working retail in New York City, spiritual bookshop retail, but still I didn't have the money for things like that. So I learned through practicing on myself, taking notes, developing my craft, and then slowly integrating what I was learning into my healing practice. And so I have in like the past couple decades, I've had a mentor here or there in terms of different things, but in terms of crystals, no one.
That's so
Yeah.
that's so fascinating. And when you started doing this kind of work, especially because it was at a time when it wasn't as I mean, a lot of people I feel like, well, a lot of people kind of within this community or whatnot, like some have kind of heard of it in some sense. How was that taken by, let's say, your close friends or your families? I mean, did I'm asking this like really personally for me because I
Yeah,
just
sure.
feel like I'm met with so much taunting and teasing and I get, made fun of about it and no one takes it seriously. And I'm just curious what your experience was like.
Ah, the eye glaze,
Uh-huh.
the autonomous eye glaze. It was like, you know, at the time when I was working professionally, and at this point I was full time. I was full time professional. But at the parties or meeting, the friends of whoever I was dating at the time or whatnot, asking what I was doing. And if I mentioned Reiki, people had kind of heard about Reiki. Like I still remember us cheering when they were finally offering Reiki at the Bergdorf
Oh.
Spa. It was like, we've made it, we're in the Ivy League department stores now. We've made it. But yeah, it would be the eye glaze and just immediately they'd stop listening to me. Yeah, they'd lose interest. They'd start because it's just even to this day, and I think even in the spiritual community, it's still, I don't feel as respected in many ways as other modalities. And I think, to be completely honest, I think part of that is there's a lot of misinformation that's shared about it. There's a lot of like, spiritual word salad and bypassing, that it really kind of still passes as standard in the crystal healing community. And so I think, to some extent, that's it. And then I also just don't think it has been investigated, scientifically explored to the extent that others have. And yet crystals are in all of our tech,
Mhm.
you know? Clearly they have energy frequency impact on things. And so it's like if they're keeping energy and frequency and things like that stabilized in all of our tech and helping to make all of our tech work, why wouldn't they have that, similar effect on us? Like it really kind of doesn't make sense. But
Mhm.
as far as my my immediate family goes, they've always kind of just let me do my thing. You know, my mom has always been far more open to it than anyone else. Like even when she's been in hospital, had a sore back, I'll bring in a selenite stick, and the nurses are like, "Oh, what's this?" Because it helps her. So, but then in terms of friends, I just started making friends in the spiritual community. I just found my tribe, so to speak.
Yeah.
And anyone who I was friends with before that, who I'm still friends with now, they were always kind of naturally open to that as well. That's law of attraction. So yeah, from people who didn't know me very well, they didn't necessarily take it seriously, but for the people who did know me, it was okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is true. I guess a lot of times I'm just met with a lot of misunderstanding, I think is the most biggest
Yeah.
part of it. And I just often am just like, well, I don't feel like explaining, you
Yeah,
know,
and you don't have to.
I don't
You
have
don't
to.
have to. And you don't have to convince people either. That's
Yeah.
the other thing that was, years ago in so many interviews, I'd be asked, how do you speak to skeptics about all of this? And I'm like, I don't. They're entitled to their beliefs and their opinions just as I am. We need to remember that beliefs and opinions are not fact. That's the
Mhm.
first thing. But I don't. I'm here to share my work with whoever is seeking it out. That's my calling. That's my purpose. None of us on this planet are here for all of us. So
Absolutely.
it's like you just honor you. You do your thing, and families. Sometimes we just have to find ways to deal with them. But if there are other people who are in our lives by choice and they're not at least being respectful of us and our beliefs, then maybe they don't belong, in our lives by choice.
Yeah. I totally agree with you as far as like, um, I'm just not here to convince anyone of anything. I can only speak for my own I'm only speaking from my own personal experience, and I know that the changes in my
Yeah.
life have been profound. And I that's what I attribute a lot of it to. But I think with you in particular, I find your approach just very different because I think a lot of people they go to the metaphysical store, they see the tumbled stone, they see the little label on the stone, maybe they pick up a few, but then it's like, well, now what do I do with it? I'm just going to sit on my desk. Are they going to sit in a little jar? I don't know what to do with it other than it's kind of cool and it looks pretty or whatnot. But you you approach it differently because from what I mean, as a student of yours, I mean, I feel like I'm learning really how to work with the actual stone. So how do you feel like your approach is a lot different than others? Because I just feel like it's so different than other people I see.
Well, I think, first and foremost, my approach is conscious. So there's never a crystal that I'm working with without first connecting with its spirit, its consciousness, and its energy, which I know is a big. That's a big difference, I guess, from a lot of people. Like I have for a very long time believed that everything has spirit, everything has consciousness, because everything's made of consciousness, everything's ultimately made of energy and light, and energy is ultimately information that's moving. So that's the first thing. I work with them as allies. I work with them as allies. I work with them as friends. I work with them as partners. I work with them as kin. And so that's the first way. But then the second way is, for about, I would say, really honestly, about 14, maybe 15 years of my career, maybe a little bit less. It was much more of what I would call the traditional approach. I mean, it's still modern, but traditional in that it was meditation, it was placing them on energy centers, to support or help affect healing and transformation. And there just came a point where, especially, some people were taking it down the science route, which I really respect and appreciate. And I hope that more of that is done in terms of really starting to study their energetic impact on us. But I'm not a scientist. I have a brain for those things. I love physics. I love biology, but it's just not where my heart and soul was taking me. And so when I really just centered in my soul, which is the other thing, the other difference I think is the crystals are always teaching, they're always telling me that we are the magic, we are the miracle. So everything is within us already. And essentially what they're doing is they're helping to activate. that within us. They're helping to amplify that. They're helping it, they're helping to direct it. Again, not so different from how they function in our tech, from what I understand with my layman's brain, right? How they function in our tech. But just dropping into my soul, I was like, where do I really want to go with this? And I was like, even if this is like a complete and total like kamikaze move with my career, while everyone's getting into the science and wanting to be able to explain this in cocktail parties and whatnot, I want to go down the mystic path. I just want to go full, deep, all in spiritual and magic, and just see where it takes me. And the interesting thing is, where it took me into even deeper levels of healing, because all of a sudden it started taking me into our psyche, our unconscious, what's patterned in our cellular memory. And cellular memory is a real thing. They're already studying that in terms of biology, psychology, where it's taking us in terms of what's encoded in our DNA, which is still a massive, ever expanding, area of science, as you know. So it's like they really started bringing me down into those areas where I felt like we couldn't directly consciously address before, in the way I was working with them, in terms of our shadow selves, in terms of the things that are blocking us, unconsciously blocking us in our mindsets and our emotional bodies. It started bringing me into ancestral and generational healing, which is huge. I mean, ancestral and generational patterns are impacting more of us in ways than most of us are even able or willing to acknowledge. And then there's the past life, which, depending on your system of belief, past life, parallel life, if you're open to that, bringing me into that too, because, there comes a question, okay, if all this stuff happened in my past life, if all this stuff happened in my ancestry, it's back there, how is it affecting me now? Well, because it's in you now. It's in your cells, it's in your DNA. You inherited that with your genetics. And that's how it's patterning through and affecting you now. So it's like they brought me all into these deep levels of healing and started showing me how everything is ultimately encoded in this universe, blueprinted, created. They brought me into sacred geometry. It was just like it was falling down the rabbit hole. So that's very much. It never ends. I'm still falling. Occasionally I grab at a cup of tea, and it's like, wait, to keep myself sustained as I continue. But yeah, it's ever unfolding and expanding. And so that's where they brought me. And that's when I'm able to do the remote work that I do, in terms of energy clearing and everything else, because everything's ultimately it's frequencies, it's codes. And when you learn how to channel things specifically and address and strategically, you can shift them, So yeah, I mean, that's a very exceptionally long-winded answer to your question in terms of, I guess, how I might be different to other people out there.
Well, and I just know that for me, coming from a science background, and I was a genetics major in college, and then listening to your teachings, I just like, every time I listen to one of your classes, I'm just like sitting there after the class and I'm like, I think I need to listen to that class again, because that just it expands my mind. But it's like, but it also in some senses feels like it's kind of like, I don't want to say obvious, but like it makes so much sense on like such a deep level.
Sense. Yeah. I mean, it sounds really out there at first, but you've nailed it. That's how I always felt. At the end of the day, I'm like, of course, that just makes so much sense. Like, in a way, a lot of this stuff is, I want to say, quote unquote, logical. When you really start to look at it and break it down. And so, when people study in my system, I remember that as a student saying this to me, I think like 3 years ago, she was like, how did you figure all of this out? Because she's like, it works. It just works. And I'm like, I didn't figure it out. I followed along. They gave me breadcrumbs and puzzle pieces. And again, everything with me develops in the field, in the lived experience. And eventually, finally, it was like a picture formed. And I was like, OMG, there it is. So.
Yeah. And I mean, these things don't just develop overnight. I mean, I'm sure that it took you time to put all of this together. I mean, these are concepts that are big concepts. They're sometimes hard for us to really wrap our brain around. But like, it's like, I feel like once you kind of get it, you get it. And it actually makes working with the stones so much easier because you're not just sitting there trying to memorize a book, a book with all the different meanings. Cause that's the part that I always struggled with. It's like, well, I have all these stones, but I can't remember all their different meanings. And so what am I supposed to do? And it felt like that wasn't working for me.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, as soon as you start to, like, especially when you start to connect with them consciously, like, I think I said that just in a few classes ago, it's like, there's a big difference between just holding or wearing a crystal all day and not really paying attention to it. Of course, it's still going to be having an energetic impact. But when you're actually consciously connecting to it, it's like 100 times, that experience and that effect, where, that might be a bit dramatic, but at least 10, that, 10 times. It's kind of like the difference between eating something really fast and then being like, oh my God, I didn't taste that, and sitting and savoring. It's like a simple example, but it's the same thing. So it's like when you start to consciously engage with the crystal and really pay attention to how it feels, how it's affecting you, what it's bringing up for you, or whatever it might be. It's kind of like once you've, again, tasted a food, you always remember what that food is. So when you start to work with crystals more deeply, of course you're going to remember, who and what they are, what their healing effects are, because you've actually experienced them. It's kind of like, okay, I can read a description of spaghetti and I can try and remember what that tastes like, and, da, 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 da. But when I sit and eat it, then all of a sudden it's a part of me I'm always going to remember. So
That's
yeah,
interesting you mentioned that.
memorizing the properties. To me, it's like, A, it doesn't work. And B, this is also why I'm an advocate for having fewer crystals and getting deeper into them, because you don't need all the herbs or supplements
Yes.
on the market. You don't need all the crystals.
Yes.
What you need is what you need
Yes.
to help you heal, transform, and, achieve whatever intention or result you're seeking.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned the pasta because it's so true. And even this morning, like I got up and I took my son to daycare and we walked in the daycare and he's like, Mom, it smells good in here. And I was like, oh, they're probably getting your lunch ready. He's like, it smells like pasta. And I was like, yes, it's like that very distinct, it's like the smell of like the noodle. And like, when you smell that, you remember how it tastes and that's, I mean, for me, it's like, it's hard to remember stuff until I have to like read it and then I have to do it, I have to work with it and then I have to share it. And like that process is how I truly embed that knowledge into my body. And then it's like riding a bike after that. It's like, oh, I know this.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, you used a key word there, embed. Like it's when it becomes, embodied, that it actually becomes, part of us, part of our experience, part of our conscious, our consciousness. Yeah.
And I
Otherwise
remember,
it's just floating around up here.
yeah. And I remember like when I first really started connecting with crystals and I would go into places or I would be researching and I was just like, I don't understand. Like how do certain crystals have on the little card, like how are those how do they get those meanings and how are they attributed to all those different experiences and things like that? And I couldn't really understand it. And then I started doing more research on it. And then through the help of like your class and like channeling the spirit of the crystal, it's like now it kind of makes sense. But I mean, even one of the things that I like to share on my podcast here is that it's like you can go to the store and you can pick out a stone, and it says that it's, like rose quartz. Oh, it's supposed to be for love and self-love. But if you hold it and maybe you're getting a different message from it, don't disregard that because it's maybe not something that's on the label.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And all the labels, all the information that we have, some of it is definitely sourced through history and passed down, through folklore and other things. And some of it is literally someone just sat and did the same thing, right? They sat, they channeled the crystal, they channeled the spirit of the crystal or information from their spirit guides or however they did, and how they were feeling, what was affecting, and they wrote it down and they put it in a book. And that's how we know. But can crystals have different effects on you? Absolutely. Because again, they're activating what's in you. So there will be resonant bandwidths in terms of frequency, and commonalities, but the difference is always going to be is going to be you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I love, I've been really consuming a lot of your Instagram lately, and I've been really loving some of the approaches that you have. You've been talking a lot. You talk about, like, you had a recent one about cord cutting, and you had your own specific approach to that I thought was fascinating. I'm wondering if you would speak to that, because I feel like a lot of people in the crystal community, from my observations, it's like a lot of love and light. And I see that you're willing to kind of go there with kind of more of the shadow side of things. Um, and I appreciate that, because our world is not all just love and light.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's, I smile when you say that, because I was pretty much dragged to the shadow, kicking and screaming. It was not, like shadow work and shadow working. And I'm talking beyond shadow self to actually dealing with spirit shadow and all of that is, it's not for the faint of heart, surely, it's not, but, that's, exactly as you said, like we're not, the world is not all love and light. And, um, we have parts of ourselves that we have to look at, we have to heal. There's stuff in this world we have to look at and we have to heal. It's like, if you're not willing to face it, how can you help heal it? Is
Mhm.
really kind of, and that's true for all of us. I used to say in my crystal therapy program, before it closed, that pretty much anything that is ailing a person that is not physical, purely physical in nature, is shadow.
Mhm.
And so there comes a point, we can't be stuck in that loop all the time, but there comes a point we have to face, and you have to deal with that stuff. So cord cutting is a classic example, because to me, so much of this stuff, it's symptom. It's not the cause, it's symptom. So it's like when people talk, oh, I just severed the cord to my abusive whatever, and and cleared that from my system. And it's like, really, you don't have years of healing still inside from that situation that you're gonna have to address. So I mean, like, that's the first thing. But the bottom line is, when there's a cord that is attached to you, there's a reason it's attached. And sometimes in certain cases, like where you just had like an intense encounter, with a stranger, like, I remember someone using the example of like road rage, years ago or whatever else, and you sever the cord. And yes, sometimes that will resolve it. So often it doesn't, especially if it's karmic, forget about it until you address the karma. The cord is just going to reform. And so that's the same with any of the thing. It's like, just cutting a cord is not actually addressing the cause of it in the first place. And one of the things too that people don't consider is we can form our own cords to other things. We're not always just victim to the cord, right? So there can be stuff inside that we need to heal, that we need to resolve. So that's why I say, if you keep cutting and severing cords and they keep coming back, they're calling your attention to what actually needs to be addressed. So instead of taking that painkiller pill, or whatever example they have for treating symptoms, you have to start looking at the cause. Because even if the cord is coming from another source, if it's able to continue attaching to you, there's something inside of you that needs to be addressed. It doesn't mean it's your fault that the cord is there, but maybe it's finding an insecurity that it's hitting. Maybe it's finding a fear. Maybe it's finding something unresolved within you that, again, it's time for you to resolve, because once it can't, find that weakness in our energetic field, it can't attach anymore. So that's the first thing. What surprised me, and I saw this in comments on, some of these videos I've shared, and this kind of blew my mind, because I didn't know that this was happening out there, that I guess there are healers out there who won't cut the cord, and they won't sever the cord for that. Well, I guess not for that reason, but because they were saying that if you sever the cord, there's a remnant of the cord that still stays in your energetic field, which, based on my experience, is true. And so that will just reform itself again. And I thought, Okay. All right. So this is not like a malignant growth where if you just cut off a part of it, it's going to keep growing. Again, there's a cause, there's a reason that cord formed in the first place. And clearing that remnant out of the energetic body is very easy. Like I demonstrated it on Instagram with a selenite stick. It's very easy to clear that remnant. But again, that's not the point. But you don't want to leave them attached either. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of why I'm bringing this up. You don't want to leave them attached either because they continue to siphon energy out of your energy body, out of your energetic field. They continue to create imbalance. So they do have to be cleared, but you've then got to address whatever the issue, whatever the issue is, you know? And so and again, when you're someone who has walked the path for a long time, who's done healing work for a long time, who's done clearing work for a long time, these are the things you learn. This is how you deepen and evolve, into your work. It's just, I think it's a common complaint out there in this day and age. There's so many people who are sharing information and opinion and
Mm-hmm.
belief as fact
Mm-hmm.
without having any field experience to, first of all, understand what they're talking about, but second of all, even to back it up or make it valid. So yeah, that's my rant on cord cutting.
Yes, no, I love that. I mean, you
From
shared
all angles.
well, you share so much good information, I think, which is really, I mean, yeah, I mean, you have a lot of really good information for people to just check out. I mean, and it's free, and you could learn a different perspective, and I think that that's always really helpful because I know for me, when I first understood cord cutting, I'm like, well, okay, I understand that, but at the same time, like doing the process to cut the cord, I but have I done any of the work to like actually like I feel like
Mhm.
all that's still there. So like I've done the cord cutting, but that like all that stuff is still remaining. So I don't I to me it never really even made sense how that
Yeah,
would really even work. Because if I haven't healed
yeah,
that problem from the get-go, then and some of these things can be cords and issues like from like way back, like way before our even like our present moment, right? Like spirit
yeah.
attachment and things, right? I mean, maybe I'm not saying that right, but like it could be
Oh
from
yeah,
way prior to even our existence, previous generations, things that attach to us and we carry with us through our different lineages. And so we don't really know, maybe so we don't really know why we feel a certain way. Yeah, so I find that really fascinating. Um, and I think that speaks a lot to some of the other things that I was going to ask you about. But one of the things that you shared with us was a story in our class that we're taking, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Like as far as clearing things out from the past, you shared the story about um, like fears and things that go way back, and you shared the story about bees.
oh yeah, yeah.
And to me, that was like really impactful because I thought, I mean, this could be, if you don't mind sharing that story, but I think that this affects people not only with bees, but like with so many things. Some of these issues that we have are so irrational sometimes. And doing a cord cutting or doing something like that doesn't necessarily just make it go away. And that's some of the
Yeah.
deeper work that you offer.
Well, yeah, because the thing is, if we have like, and we can call something irrational only because we haven't found a rational
Mhm.
explanation for it yet. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? But it doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't one. And so the thing is with that was an example of yeah, and for people out there, the context is, I'm teaching this Akashic Crystal Healing certification, which is all about healing past life and ancestral generational patterns, dark contracts, karmic cords, et cetera, with crystals. And so the how I learned this, and again, I learned this through the stones. I learned this through channeling, through my own lived experience, and then application, in the field. Is that ultimately, when we were talking about all these things that we come into this lifetime with, whether it's generational, whether it's past life, karma, we're carrying these in our codes, but it's not like we're in that past life moment of, whenever happened. It's not like we're our ancestor currently being, hit with a stick or, whatever, right? So what is it that's actively patterning through us and affecting us? Well, it's memory. It's the memory of these things. And you know, one of the things again that I learned through the crystals that I thought was so potent, and I think actually I learned this through the Lemurian seeds. This is again where that Lemurian energy comes in consciousness. Is that, you know, we're commonly told and taught that all of our reality, all of creation is made through thought, which I believe. But it's also, our reality is not just made of thought, it's also based on memory. And if you think about how important memory is even in your daily life, it is how you are able to eat. It is how you're able to drive. It is how you're able to do your job. It is how you're able to put on your shoes. It's how you remember who you are. And when you come home, who that little person is who's saying, "Hi, mom," you know, at the door, right? Um, our whole reality is based on memory. Everything we, you know, everything that happens, everything we experience, we interpret based on memory. How we communicate through language, all of this is based on memory. So it may have been initially created through thought, and we're constantly creating through thought, but we're also completely living based on memory. So when we've got memories patterning through us of things that happened in our past lives, that happened in our, you know, in our you know, back through the generations in our ancestry, it makes sense that that's affecting our reality now, that it's affecting how we think, how we behave, what we choose, maybe even our health, you know, our emotional patterns. It makes sense because this is all part of our reality makeup, just like any memories we have from this current life experience. So the story of the bees was essentially, and hopefully no one out there has like a fear of bees, but the story of the bees was that, you know, we have a person in this lifetime who is terrified of bees, but they don't know why. They haven't been stung in this lifetime. They haven't had that problem. And I had the same thing. I came into this lifetime with this terrible fear of sharks. You know, so I could even use myself as an example. And people were like, "Oh yeah, you saw Jaws when you were a kid." Are you kidding? I never went near that movie. Are you nuts? If you said to me, if I was swimming in a pool and I was a kid and you said, "Krista, there's a shark in the pool," I would have flown. I would have defied the rules and laws of physics. I would have been out of that pool so fast. And again, we can say, okay, it's not rational, right? Obviously, there's no shark in the pool, although one never knows, right? According to James Bond, there might be. So anyway, yeah, so you have these fears, and where did it come from? Well, in a past life, I got chased by a horde of bees, and you know, maybe they were stung by that horde, maybe they died, maybe they were just chased, because sometimes fear is enough. It's not even that something bad happened to us, it's just the fear. That was actually the case of my shark past life. I was never attacked by a shark, but there was a fear that carried over. And so, you know, we look at the memory and it's like, okay, well, how do we heal that? And the very first thing that the crystals have taught me, that again, to us, if we think about it as logical, is that we can't go in the past. We can't go back into the past and change what happened in the past. We can't change what we experienced. We can't rewrite it. Once something happens, it is written into existence. It is there. But we can't change memory, because memory is subjective. Just like history is subjective, memory is subjective. We've all heard of those examples of, you get 5 people who witness an event, and all 5 of them have a different telling of how it went down, how it happened, who caused it, etc., because it's subjective. So if memory is subjective, and it's not even necessarily based on quote unquote fact, because they've also done studies where they found that sometimes we can form memories of things that just never even happened. If we can form memories, then we can reform memories. We can rewrite memories. And so the work essentially is, we journey back, you know, through dream, through vision, through whatever, through the crystal, you know, trance states that we induce. And we start to rewrite that memory, and that's what starts to pattern in our consciousness. So all of a sudden, yeah, you were chased by bees, but let's flip the perspective. Maybe they weren't actually after you. Maybe they were after an attacker who was behind you that you didn't see. And actually, the bees were your allies. They were your saviors. They helped you in this lifetime. You know, maybe they chased you because you actually did something awful to their hive, and maybe you need to atone, maybe you need to address it, whatever. So it's like, as soon as you start to rewrite that experience and how you remember it, that's what then begins to change the energetic patterning. because it is subjective. All there's a plasticity to all of reality. As you know, there's a plasticity to our DNA. So when we start to consciously do that work, and again, in a way where it's ethical, we're being intentional, etc., then it becomes really powerful.
Yeah, I felt like that was so impactful because I never really had thought about anything. I had never really thought about it like that before. And I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And you've seen it work. I mean, you're doing this work like in real time. So you see that this healing happens for people.
Yeah. And again, I keep it, I'm very particular, because this could start to raise some red flags, in the psychology world. And I respect that. I'm very particular to remain within my scope. So we're dealing with ancestral, we're dealing with past life. In my private client practice, do I have clients who work with me in terms of healing or addressing things that happen in childhood? And it's like, yes, but again, remember, we're not wiping the memory. Whatever happened, happened. That is a part of our story too. That does not change. But maybe now you have an opportunity to go back and speak up for yourself in a way that you couldn't before. Maybe you can go back and see things from a different perspective that helps you make peace with a certain person or a situation. Maybe you go back and you completely take yourself out of a situation, or you make a different choice, or whatever it is, So again, it's all patterning. It's just addressing patterns that are in ultimately our unconscious, our subconscious, and channeling crystal energy in order to help affect that, because again, they're those stable frequencies. So they help to heal us at these deep levels, these deep cellular DNA unconscious levels, in a way that just placing a stone on a chakra or sitting and meditating with something, doesn't, because we're not consciously engaging with what's happening inside of ourselves.
When you're working with your clients, are you primarily doing that kind of work, like working with the Akashic Records and healing those past memories? I mean, I feel like you do a lot of different type of work with crystals.
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, when I'm working with clients, I'm really working. It's actually within kind of just three. There's just three pathways really for me. The one is the energy clearing. So whether that's for space, whether that's for energetic field, that's the first thing. The second one is the Akashic healing, and again, primarily we're addressing stuff that's patterning in our lives now that isn't applicable now anymore, right? So we're rewriting that. So that will be past life. That will be ancestral. And then the third one is really, really helping people to um, come back into alignment with themselves. And what I mean by that, in essence, is really being able to hear themselves, hear their truth, really listen to themselves, their body, their truth, what it is they really truly desire, what it is that really truly is not working in their lives, like really coming to that place of deep inner awareness, and connection to intuition, so that they can start making the decisions, taking the actions, the choices that are going to transform their lives. Because again, it's coming back to us being the miracle, us being the magic. So, really coming into coherence with our soul selves, but in very, very practical, very real ways. So those are the three ways primarily that I work with people. And even with the Akashic healing, even if it is stuff in this lifetime, it's only ever stuff that they're at a point where they're ready to resolve it. You know what I mean? So they've already been through the therapeutic process or whatever else it is, and they're ready to resolve it. So it all stays within that spiritual realm. But those are really the three main. Those are really the three main things, because even the Lemurian work that I teach people, all of that again comes into that soul coherence, that soul alignment, and activating medicine and energies within us that we already carry, but don't always consciously connect with. So
Yeah, I feel that because I had worked with someone that was doing a channeling session for me a while back, and one of the things that just kept coming through is like, everything you need is already inside you. Everything you need is already inside you, but it is. But then the crystals are really there to help support that journey. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the thing is, we can be told that. And I mean, that's an old teaching. I mean,
Yeah.
even if you go back and read, good old Napoleon Hill,
Right.
right? That's one of the Napoleon Hill affirmations. So it's like, I genuinely believe that when we come into this lifetime, because our DNA, from what I've channeled and learned, and I know I'm not the only medium who has said this, not only carries, yes, of course, our genetics and all the stuff that science has already verified, our past life memory, our karma. There's astrological imprint in there. There's obviously our ancestral memory and generational patterns, but there's also our soul's plan. There's also our soul's design. There's creator energy in there, where you want to call it God energy, whatever. There's pure raw source energy. So it's like we come in really, I do believe, with everything we need in this lifetime in terms of whatever we need to heal, but also whatever we need to achieve, whatever we've come here to experience. The big question, which is, I think the obvious question that people come to, oh yeah, that's so deep. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. How do I do that? Right. And I've always kind of been the how person,
Yes.
because I've been, at my own epic onion that I've had to peel in this lifetime. I've needed a lot of healing. I still do. So the question is how, and so again, what the crystals do, and dropping deep down into our center, connecting with them consciously, channeling those frequencies, we begin to bring to the surface, we begin to activate, we begin to amplify, what it is that we need, that clarity, that insight, that spirit guidance, whatever it is, our purpose. We all come in here encoded, with our purpose, and what our purpose is meant to be in this lifetime, which is not always vocation. But again, people have trouble finding that. So it's getting into those deeper layers. And that's where, again, the crystals are phenomenal allies, because while our frequencies are not stable, theirs always are. So when you're working with crystals whose frequencies are resonant with what you're seeking to find, heal, repel, clear, activate, well, your chances of success have just exponentially increased, right? Because you've essentially got that energy key.
Yes. And I feel that because I remember like at a stage in my life where this is just even a few years ago, it's like I had done all the things. I checked all the boxes, I'd gone to medical school, I had the job, the house, the kids, the all the things. And then I'm just like, okay, so this is it. Now what? And then I
Mm.
found I was at a place in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I found this piece of celestite, and I started connecting with
Ah.
this particular stone, and all of a sudden my life like really started to shift. And it was like all this memory of like who I am in my soul and in like my past lives, and like everything started flooding in. And I'd never really experienced anything like that before. And and it opened everything up for me. And now I all of a sudden I feel like I have a purpose. This isn't really what I thought my purpose was going to be, but like I have a purpose of like sharing these things, of having the podcast, exploring your teachings, like hopefully offering them in my own way going forward. And it all started after I picked up one stone and just started connecting. It was so
Yeah.
weird. Like, it was just to me, it was like, "Whoa, what's happening?"
Yeah. And that is celestite medicine. Celestite
Yeah.
medicine is so much about that spiritual activation or awakening, as some people put it, soul purpose, aligning with soul's purpose, higher calling. Absolutely. So that it does not surprise me at all. And Celestite has been one of my, I would say, epic crystal teachers in this lifetime. Definitely. I mean, it's the one that first taught me about light codes and channeling light codes for healing and everything else. So I mean, it's an amazing crystal.
And
Yeah.
when I first picked it up, I didn't even know what it was. Like, I just saw it and I said, "I need that. That is coming home with
Mhm.
me right now, and this is
Mhm.
gonna help me." And I
Mhm.
know, like, it was almost like this instant knowing, like, something about this stone is gonna help me change my life. And it really did. And I know, like, when I try to share that with a lot of people in my life, like, they can't understand that, and that's fine. They don't have to, but it's so real for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it's probably challenging for you too, coming from that scientific background and vocation, which, is very structured and very cemented in terms of
Yes.
what is essentially allowed within it or acceptable, and what isn't. There's a lot actually that falls outside of it. But yeah, but that crystal calling to you the way that did. I mean, that's when I refer to crystals singing to you, when they sing to you, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It just sang to your soul. It was that resonance, and you had that knowing in your cells. So already it was beginning to activate something for you. You heard the call, you answered.
Okay. So for listeners that are hearing all of this, if they're feeling intrigued by this, where would you suggest them to start? Like, if they're interested in your work, is the best place to go your Instagram, your website? I mean, your website's pretty amazing. You have all of your offerings on there, which are all fascinating. And I can speak to the Akashic Crystal Healing. That has been absolutely mind blowing for me. But I mean, it is a lot. I feel like, sometimes hearing all this can feel kind of overwhelming, but I feel like you teach it in such a way that when you actually get into the work, you don't just like put it all on your students at once. Like, it's a buildup.
It's step by step, layer by layer. That's how we learn best. And again, when you've learned everything through the field, that's how you've learned too. So I basically teach how I learned, filtered, refined, structured, of course. But that's how I teach. But I think probably the easiest, the most accessible is what you mentioned, just going either to my Instagram or TikTok and just starting there, because then it's bite-sized bits of different things that I share, different things that I do, and starting there. For people who want to begin an exploration of connecting with the spirit and consciousness of crystal energy, of starting to journey and doing some of that deeper mystical work, I think that the mystery school, we have a 1-year access pass to my mystery school where it's all just short, we call them quests. And they're just short, little experiences that are guiding you through, again, step by step, starting to form those connections, starting to do some of that work, completely at your own pace. And, I consider that to be like more of like an I'm not going to say beginner, because I don't think any of my work strictly is beginner, but also what is beginner?
Right.
Like we've all kind of, so I would say that that's probably the easiest and most fun place for people to start. And then, the bigger programs are where you want to like dive in and really go deeper into something like the Akashic program or the Crystal Hang program. In the fall, I'm changing my curriculum slightly, and I'm doing a light warrior training, because just again, from comments and things that I've seen out there, what people are saying, a lot of people don't have those fundamentals in terms of, grounded, practical, effective approaches to energy clearing, but also to energetic protection, and psychic self-defense. So that's something I'll be doing in the fall. But so, yeah, that's where you go if you want to go into things deeper. But I think that the mystery school pass, as I said, it's like a crystal mystics candy store, and that's a good place to start.
That, of course, speaks my language. So
yeah, but you dove in, baby. You dove in, baby.
So and I was like, oh, come on. Challenge me. I'm always up for a challenge. I that's always been my go-to. But yeah, I've been sitting with a lot of the teachings that you've shared, and it's been really profound. And I think I think going forward, I think overall it makes me feel so much more confident in my own crystal practice. It makes me understand how to work with the stones more. It makes me feel like just, I don't know, like there is a deep healing that happens. Even the healing happens, I think, throughout the course. Truthfully.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right from the get-go, I'm getting you in there. Yeah, you're getting in the pool. Yeah. So it starts right from the first class. Yeah. Always. Yeah.
Well, anyway, so you're on all the socials, the TikTok, the Instagram. Okay. I will link everything. But Krista, you've given me nearly an hour of your time, and I really appreciate it. It's been so lovely to talk to you.
Same. This was wonderful. And as I said, just even when I saw your questions, these are great questions. I was really looking forward. I was really looking forward to the conversation and just hoping that I did okay.
Kind of like you, I think I like to think about things in a different way sometimes.
Yeah, but it's good. It's meaty. So thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of like, I just noticed I was visiting my family recently and everybody just talks about like, everybody's just so surface level. Nobody talks about anything like beyond like teasing each other and the weather and like just stupid gossip. And I'm like, that is not for me. I'm like, I want to get in there. Like I want to analyze, I want to feel it. And that's hard for a lot of people. So I feel like, people like yourself and people that I've met within like the whole magical, mystical community, I feel like I'm finally finding my people. And I love that.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that too. That's, because that's the rewarding thing. That's part of the rewarding thing of being in this community. Like, as I said, like even in these courses, we're doing this deep work. But we also got into, we were drawn to spirituality because it was a reflection, I believe, of what already exists within us, but also because it brings us joy. So there has to always be that enriching component as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, at the end of the day, for me, it's fun. Like I get up and I get excited about all these things every single day. And I never really, I was always a happy person, but like I never felt the level of like joy and excitement for things that I do now that I've kind of found I'm finding my path. So, I think there's a lot that speaks to that. So anyway, Krista, thank you so much. It's just been an honor.
You're so welcome.
I thank you for joining me all the way from your place to mine and taking the time to figure out how to make the connection happen. And yes, and I will let you know when this episode is coming out. And I just can't wait to share you with my audience.
Cool. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Ashley. This was wonderful. And so I'm grateful that you gave me the time and that you were interested. And
absolutely.
You've just been an absolute delight. So thank you.
All right, Krista, have a beautiful day. Bye.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you so much for spending this time at the threshold with me. If you want to go deeper, follow me on Instagram at mystical.mama.ash, where I share daily crystal magic and behind the scenes of this liminal life. You can also find resources, previous episodes, and ways to work with me at bigcrystalenergy.com. We're also on YouTube at Big Crystal Energy Podcast. And if this episode resonated with you, please rate it and review it and share it with a friend that you think would connect with it. It would mean so much to me and helping build this beautiful community of other magical friends and crystal workers. Thank you so much. Until next time, bye.